In this section, we'll discuss pyramid visuals and MeCeFeSa structure, which are principles that top-tier consulting firms use to structure their business writing. So what are pyramid visuals? They're essentially McKinsey's approach to structure. So the term was first coined by Barbara Minto. To give you a bit more context, the first female MBA professional hire McKinsey ever made, Barbara is known for the Minto Pyramid Principle, her immortal framework for writing and presenting ideas. The countless courses Barbara has taught on the subject have made it, for many, practically synonymous with structure. So here's how Barbara describes it. The pyramid is a tool to help you find out what you think. The great value of the technique is that it forces you to pull out of your head information that you weren't aware was there, and then helps you to develop and shape it until the thinking is crystal clear. How does this apply to the documents that you'll be preparing? Well, if we think about cover letters, for example, we want to make sure that we're presenting a very concise and crystal clear argument as to how our client will be a perfect match for the role that they're applying for. And then even when you're preparing resumes and you're structuring your bullet points, in what order do you present the information and how do you ensure that it is covering all of the topics required? To take a look at this in a bit more of a visual, this is what the pyramid really looks like. So at the top you have your main point. Then you'll break up the main point into the supporting arguments, and then you'll dive into a bit more depth. So you'll provide concrete evidence that supports your arguments, and then you'll also draw insights and conclusions for the reader. So we never want to leave our reader to assume why the client will be a good fit for a role, but we want to directly spell this out for them. Let's take a look at a practical example. So we may have a cover letter where our main point is, I would be a strong fit for the role based on my ability to improve financial performance, lead complex projects, and manage remote teams. So this is a sentence you would have in the opening paragraph of your cover letter. Then your supporting arguments would essentially be the body paragraphs. So you had the first paragraph where you discuss ways in which the client improved financial performance. In the second paragraph, you'll talk about the complex projects they led. And in the third, you'll discuss how they managed remote teams. So your topic sentences will align with each of those subjects. And then you'll provide specific examples from the context of the client's work experience to really demonstrate how they were able to improve financial performance, and then explain to the reader why this is relevant to them and their particular organization. So something along the lines of, at your company, I would apply my skill set in identifying ways to improve financial performance to also reduce expenses, or whatever it might be. But the main point here is that we really want to be intentional and thoughtful about how we are presenting the content of our documents to make sure that it's not really all over the place and rambling and we have overlapping information, for example. And then speaking of overlapping information, we have this concept of MeCeFeSa, which is essentially an acronym that we'll discuss in a bit more detail, but that will really help you make sure that you don't have overlapping information and that things have a very tight structure. So what does it stand for? Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, functionally equivalent, and sequentially appropriate. So whenever you have groupings in your documents, right? So in the context of a cover letter, this would be the body paragraphs of your cover letter, or in the context of your resume, it would be the bullet points in your resume. All of these should be mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, functionally equivalent, and sequentially appropriate. So let's discuss exactly what each one of these points really means. The concept of mutually exclusive implies that information should only appear once with little overlap between sections. So in other words, all of the elements of your writing should be mutually exclusive of each other. Let's take a look at this list. So we have a client that we're preparing a cover letter for, and we're trying to decide how to organize the information. We might have one paragraph that discusses financial planning and analysis. And within that paragraph, we'll talk about the topics of budgeting and forecasting and then data analysis. In our second paragraph, we have project management and then a bunch of the projects that the client worked on. So we had expense analysis and reduction, organizational restructuring, IT software rollout execution, and then monthly budget preparation. If we really think about this list, we'll find that it is not mutually exclusive, because things like monthly budget preparation, for example, would really be a subcategory of budgeting and forecasting. And then expense analysis and reduction might fall under data analysis, right? So to make this mutually exclusive, this is how we could realign our paragraphs. So our first paragraph would talk through financial planning and analysis and the two areas of budgeting and forecasting and data analysis. And then perhaps the specific examples we use to talk about the topic of budgeting and forecasting would be the monthly budget preparation process and ways in which the client was able to drive improvements there. And then within data analysis, we could use this expense analysis and reduction project to really paint the picture for the reader of how their client is able to take certain data and draw conclusions from it and then drive results for the company. And then within project management, right, maybe we're really only left with that IT software rollout execution, and we can discuss that project in a lot more detail. Collectively exhaustive. So collectively, you should cover all of the elements relevant to the topic at hand. For our purposes, all of the information combined should capture the breadth and depth of the client's experience. So think about what is applicable and what skill sets and attributes you really want to convey throughout the resume and the cover letter, and make sure all of those are coming across. And then functionally equivalent. Each of your sections should be functionally equivalent, meaning that categories should be used in the same way. So if we think about a very basic example, we have this list over here on the left, apples, oranges, fruit, vegetables, and natural food. So this is not functionally equivalent. And why is that? Because apples and oranges are really a type of fruit, right? And then natural foods sort of encompass everything in this list. So to make our list functionally equivalent, we might break it up into fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes. Hopefully that makes sense, but definitely keep that in mind. And then sequentially appropriate. So we want to organize our information based on relevance, importance, and/or chronology. In our work experience section, for example, we always list positions in reverse chronological order because that's the way recruiters are used to seeing information, and that's what's expected. And then the bullet points themselves, so each of the bullet points for the work experience section, we're going to prioritize them based on their relevance and importance, right? So the things that will be most applicable to the client's target roles are the things we're going to make sure we surface and are immediately visible. And same concept applies for the cover letter. So when you're thinking about which order do I present the body paragraphs in, think about what's going to be most impressive and most relevant for the reader to see. And yeah, just in summary, organize information based on relevance, importance, or chronology. So within the work experience section, always reverse chronological order, and then the bullet points within that section will be prioritized based on their importance. So as a practical exercise to make sure you're thinking about these pyramid visuals and really the MeCeFeSa principles, we are going to share these two examples of ads that appeared in a newspaper way back. So you have this first example, and then you have a second example from Apple back in the day, which I think is quite cute. So if you could just take a quick look and really write up a quick paragraph discussing which of these ads is effectively applying MeCeFeSa principles and why that is the case and how it makes the document easier to read and more effective, that would be great. So hopefully you found these principles helpful, and as you're working on documents, hopefully this really gives you a framework to think about how to structure your information, and as a result makes your process much more efficient and thoughtful.